Hello and welcome to The Point. I'm Laura Richardson. Now today on To The Point we're going to be talking about photosynthesis. Now you might ask, what's that to do with the human body? What's that to do with medicine? Being that Dr. Richard Kent and I are GPs, you being a retired one and me a soon-to-be retired one, I live in hope. But Richard, we're talking about photosynthesis today, and the reason we really need to talk about photosynthesis is because the human body, we need the process of photosynthesis that was created by God. We need photosynthesis because without photosynthesis, there won't be the food we eat, all the plants that we eat, all the healthy stuff we eat, the spinach and the nuts and the seeds will not grow without photosynthesis. We also need photosynthesis because of oxygen. The plants give us, they actually give us the oxygen which we breathe in. And the carbon dioxide that we breathe out after breathing oxygen is processed by the plant through the process of photosynthesis. So thank God for photosynthesis. Richard, would you agree?
Totally agree. It's we take it all very much for granted, don't we, Laura?
Yeah.
But actually, our human body, absolutely, we have something called a Krebs cycle, and that's how we produce energy. ADP is converted into ATP, and remember this from medical school days, I'm sure. But we need oxygen and glucose to make energy in our body, to make ADP into ATP in the Krebs cycle. And the two products, oxygen and glucose, are the two very things that are produced by photosynthesis. And part of the byproducts of the Krebs cycle is carbon dioxide, which is toxic. And what does photosynthesis do? Well, it gobbles up carbon dioxide and converts it into oxygen and carbohydrates. So absolutely central to the human body, surprisingly, is this amazing photosynthesis.
So photosynthesis, the original recycling idea, carbon dioxide, oxygen, carbon dioxide, oxygen. Anyway, we're now going to go to one of Richard's amazing fun facts, which will tell us a little bit more about photosynthesis.
Hello, my name's Richard Kent. Today I wanted to talk about photosynthesis. In all the plants and all the algae in the sea, everywhere we look at the beautiful countryside, we look at the trees, the flowers, and we think, isn't it beautiful? Well, it is beautiful because God is quite capable of making something beautiful which actually is very functional. Actually, what you're looking at is a factory. All living plants are factories, and all the algae in the sea, the purpose for them is to create oxygen and food for all living organisms. That includes humans, birds, mammals, fish, everything that has a breath of life in it needs photosynthesis, needs plants. Plants are green because they have chlorophyll in all of their cells. And what happens in the chlorophyll is absolutely stunning, amazing, and totally miraculous. Because what chlorophyll does is harness light from the sun. Light comes to planet Earth from the sun in the form of photons moving in a waveform. And what the chlorophyll does is convert carbon dioxide, which is a waste product of ours, and water in the presence of sunlight into sugar in the form of starch and oxygen. What are the two things that all living organisms need? Answer: sugar and oxygen. So all the green plants that we see all do something absolutely vital for each and every one of us. They make for us sugar and oxygen, and also they mop up something we exhale with every single breath, carbon dioxide, which is acidic. And if they didn't mop it up, if the plant... But what I want to tell you is that photosynthesis is not just only amazing, there's a light and a dark form of photosynthesis, but they do it with 100% efficiency. They harness the light from the sun. Remember, the sun is 93 million miles away. It's actually a nuclear fusion factory. That's what the sun is. Every second, 600 million tons of hydrogen are converted into helium, except for 4 tons, which are converted into light, heat, and energy of different types. And that energy is mopped up, the photons moving in a waveform are mopped up in this equation called photosynthesis, to create carbon dioxide, to mop up carbon dioxide and to create for us oxygen and glucose, the things we absolutely essentially need. Now, humans can't do this. I'm sure you're familiar with some people on their roofs, they have those photoelectric cells which convert sunlight into electricity. Very good idea, but do you know how efficient they are? They are 4% efficient. That's how efficient those photoelectric cells on people's roofs are. Just 4% efficient. God's plants, by comparison, are 100% efficient. The plants are very carefully made. They have little stoma, like little mouths that open and shut to let in the oxygen and let out the carbon dioxide, to let in the carbon dioxide and let out the oxygen. They are just totally miraculous. And the other thing about them is they are really, really beautiful to look at. Everything we see about God is beautiful to behold, whether it's the human form which conforms to the divine nature, the divine ratio, or whether it's the plants which are so beautiful to look at. Whatever we look at, wherever we look with our eyes and whatever we hear with our ears, the world that God has created is miraculous and beautiful. Thanks for listening, and God bless you.
And welcome back to The Point. Fascinating. He has made everything beautiful in its own time. I mean, Richard, wonderful. Do you want to talk a little bit more about it?
Well, I'll do my best, but I'd like your help. Well, the first thing I want to say is that most of the ladies I know, and 2 particular ladies I know, are Birgit, who's actually in the room with us, and will be joining To The Point later on. Not this program, but in other programs. And also Laura, I know that both of you love flowers.
Yes.
Well, flowers are very beautiful. Plants are very beautiful, but we forget that they're factories. Their actual purpose is a factory. I want to make the point is that if you think of our factories, if you think at a factory, I don't know, Birmingham, Manchester or Leeds or somewhere, factories are not very pretty things, are they? Not usually. There's usually sort of horrible smoke coming out of them, and there's pretty grubby sort of places, and everyone comes out dirty afterwards. Not so with God. Very beautiful looking. Actually, there is something which atheists talk about, the golden ratio, but God has something called a divine ratio. I want to talk briefly about that because all plants, roses, all plants, actually, all animals and humans as well, conform to the divine ratio. I'm just going to spend a moment about this before we actually even get on to photosynthesis at all. You may not be familiar with the divine ratio. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a heads up, if you like, about the divine ratio. The Ark of the Covenant has divine ratios. The Noah's Ark has divine ratios. The table of showbread has divine ratios. The actual ratios given in Scripture are particular Scripture. Now here is some A4 paper, all right? And those particular dimensions, for some reason, are particularly attractive to humans, those particular dimensions, because they are, in fact, the divine ratio. That ratio to that ratio is 1 to 1.68. And it's the same with our human body. From my and your top of my head to the sole of my foot, that is one ratio. The top of my head to my tummy button is another ratio, and that is the golden ratio, or the divine ratio. The outside of my eyes to my nose is one ratio. The inside of my eyes, in other words, the inner canthus to my nose, is another ratio, and that is the divine ratio. In fact, on your face, you have over 1,000 golden or divine ratios. And so it is with all plants. All plants, all grass, all vegetation of all sorts, all conforms to the divine ratio. And that's before we even get on to the actual business of photosynthesis itself. The first thing I want to do is when God creates something, it's beautiful. That's why flowers are so beautiful. So I wanted to say that straight away, because when we do something, it's not usually very beautiful. I use the example of a factory, but you can think of many other things. They're not pretty. So, Laura, I can ask you, do you find flowers beautiful?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, just reminded me, your wife, Val, I owe her some flowers, because not only is she an amazing cook, absolutely amazing cook. Just a shout out to Mrs. Valerie. Is it Valerie? It is Valerie,
yes, yeah.
But we don't call her, we call her Val Kent. She's an amazing cook. She cooks deliciously healthy meals. And the last time I saw her, I owe her some flowers, so I must remember. But flowers are beautiful. And even in the scriptures where Solomon describes, they talk about the flowers. It talks about in Matthew, do not be anxious. Look at the way God has clothed the lilies. You know, just don't be anxious about anything. Look at what God does. Does he not care for you more than that? If you look at in May when the bluebells come out, and you've got fields covered in bluebells. I live close to where they've got this lovely stretch of fields where the bluebells. I mean, the flowers are just beautiful. And I have to say, unless a woman's allergic to flowers, and sadly some women are, very sadly for them, take the smile off my face, it's not a funny thing to be allergic. But unless a woman's allergic to flowers, who wouldn't like flowers?
Yes.
Beautiful. God has created this. All creation cries out his glory. All creation points to the fact that he's an imaginative, colourful, creative God. And this is just an example of it.
Yes. Word to the men out there, please buy your wife some flowers. I like to buy my wife flowers every weekend, actually, but you don't have to, but they're not too expensive. Buy your wife some flowers. So let's move on to photosynthesis. I've just got some pictures to show you. So there we have sunlight. First of all, the sun, just to remind you, is something which we can't do. We can do. We can make hydrogen bombs, we have nuclear factories, but we can't do what happens in the sun, which is nuclear fusion, which is something absolutely extraordinary. Every second, 600 tons of hydrogen are converted into helium, except for 4 tons, which are given off of heat, light, and energy. And that energy comes to planet Earth 93 million miles in the form of photons, which are subatomic particles moving in a waveform, and that waveform, by the way, conforms to the golden ratio, the divine ratio. And anyway, the plants can do something as amazing as the sun. The sun converts hydrogen into helium, but what the plants do is convert carbon dioxide, a waste product of humans, and water, which is ubiquitous on planet Earth, into something that humans need: food and oxygen. And it's something totally supernatural. I'll have to actually just read these things, so keep the pictures up there, because the plants are so amazing that they can only require 0.2% of the light energy falling on planet Earth every year to convert 70 billion tons of carbon dioxide into all the vegetation we see. That's so amazing, I think I'll read it again actually. 0.2% of the light energy falling on planet Earth in the form of photons is is used to convert 70 billion tons of carbon dioxide. Now, carbon dioxide is in the air and it's pretty light. So 70 billion tons of carbon dioxide is an awful lot of carbon dioxide, but it's got carbon in it, you see. And as you look around us at the vegetation world, everything is made basically of carbon. So all the trees, the plants, the flowers, all the wood, all the algae, everything green is made of carbon, basically. And all this is produced by photosynthesis in the chloroplasts of all the green algae in the plants, by the chloroplasts, by fixing carbon dioxide and converting water into oxygen. What actually happens is totally amazing. What happens within the chloroplast is electrons. You've heard of electrons. They are taken from the water and converted and moved over to join onto the carbon dioxide. So effectively what's happened is the oxygen is taken out of the water and added to the carbon dioxide. It's an amazing thing. We cannot do it. It'd be wonderful if humans could do photosynthesis because we wouldn't need to farm the land. Maybe when we get to heaven, maybe that's how the photosynthesis would all happen without us having to plough the fields. I don't know, because we'll have to wait until we get there, but it is amazing. Let's look at the next picture. So within those leaves, the light energy, photons moving in a waveform, they come along and enter the leaves. By the way, the leaves actually are brown as they appear in the winter. In the autumn, they will go brown. The reason they're green is the chloroplasts, the actual photosynthetic material within the leaves, are green. That's why they're green. And they trap blue and yellow light. And what they do is the water enters the leaf through special cells called xylem and phloem. They come up from the roots in the xylem and phloem. They enter the leaf. Carbon dioxide enters the leaf through the stoma. The bottom of that leaf, you can see a little hole, and they've all got their own DNA. We sort of somehow think that only humans have got DNA. No. The plants have got DNA as well. Of course, it's different to our DNA, but the plants have got DNA, and they are very, very sensitive to the environment. When the environment is right, the little mouths, if you like, the little stoma, they're called stoma, will open to let carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. When it's very dry, and the plants might dry out, those little mouths, they close to prevent the plant drying out. But when it's nice and humid, which plants like, they open and let in the gases. And then this wonderful process, this totally supernatural process of photosynthesis begins to happen. So let's look at the next picture. So there we have a picture of the stoma, or stomata in the plural. They let carbon dioxide in and oxygen out, and the guard cells are specialized cells. We tend to think of leaves as just things, lovely, pretty green things waving in the wind. No, they're very, very active. They're little factories, busy, making tons and tons and tons and tons of green, everything green, and lots of wood and everything else. And these little cells, the guard cells, they're very sensitive to the environment. They open and shut those little valves to let in the various gases, let in the carbon dioxide, and let out the oxygen. So let's have a look at the next picture. Now, as I said to you, light is actually a subatomic particle. That's what it actually is, photons moving in a waveform. It's so small you can't see it except for an electron microscope. Tiny little particles, subatomic, smaller than atoms, and yet the chloroplasts, the cells within the greenery of the plant, they can actually get hold of the energy in the photons and use that energy to strip atoms off the water and add the atoms to the carbon dioxide to make starch. It's just mind-blowing. There are actually two types of photosynthesis. There's a light photosynthesis and a dark photosynthesis. They do slightly different things, and of course it depends whether it's light or dark. We tend to think maybe that plants only operate when it's daylight. No, they're very busy at night time doing dark photosynthesis. All the time, plants are busy, busy factories. They may be pretty, we put them in their windowsill because plants are attractive, but they're busy little plants making oxygen for us. Now, of course, they also make food. Now, we do eat plants, and Laura's going to tell us in a minute how important it is for us to eat vegetables. I hope she is. That's what she normally does, and she's absolutely right. But of course, the animals and the birds and the fish, they all, to a degree, eat animal products. And of course, we eat, in turn, the animals, the plants, the birds and the fish. So it all comes back to the food cycle created by God. Maybe Laura could tell us a little about healthy eating and how greenery should be so important in our lives.
Well, even just having plants, as you mentioned, house plants in the house, because not all of us are blessed to have big gardens and living sort of suburban areas. So some people live in flats and things. Actually, just having house plants in the house actually helps with the process of exchanging air, because lots of people live in urban areas where there's lots of fumes from cars, and so having plants at home is actually a good way of keeping the air pure. It's a cheap air purifier, actually, having plants. But also, as you said, plants, if we go right back to Genesis, God actually said, these are the plants, the seed-bearing plants for you to eat. That was our original diet. That was the Genesis diet. And it wasn't until later on, after the fall of man and after the flood, that God says, okay, you can also eat animals as well. And there was a reason for that, because our DNA had changed in the sense that we had now become fallen. And as such, we needed to have some form of animal protein in the mix, although lots of people don't have animal protein and can just live on a vegan diet. But God did actually say, add that to your diet. So leafy green vegetables, fruits high in vitamin C, like strawberries and grapefruits and satsumas and kiwi fruits. You have berries that are high in antioxidants, like, you know, the strawberries and the blueberries and the raspberries. You have things, the leafy greens like spinach and kale, which are good for iron, but they're also good for things like lutein. They've got antioxidants, and they're good for fiber, they're good for protein. We've got the seed-bearing plants. You know, we've got nuts, we've got tree nuts, and we've got ordinary nut. We've got things like walnuts and almonds and hazelnuts and Brazil nuts, and they're also good because they've got omega-3 and they've got protein. And, you know, I can go on. You know, there's so many plants, and we have such a variety. You know, for vitamin C, the bell peppers, vitamin A, we got the beta-carotene, we got the sweet potatoes, the, you know, the orange papaya, and all the orange sort of coloured foods. And there's such a variety of different colours, because those colours are important, because those colours have different types of nutrients, vitamins and minerals that are contained in them. So it's very important to have a plant-based diet, but you can also have your meat because God says you could. But so important for these plants that we do, and thank God for them. Thank God that we do have plants. Now, a lot of the time, the plants are created, are grown in environments that involve lots and lots of pesticides, and this is done because insects and all sorts of other things can come and feed on the plants, and farmers lose their crops before they even get to the shops, before we get to eat them. So pesticides, unfortunately, have been developed to stop the pests from getting at the plants. So it's also very important that when people buy the stuff, that they do wash them thoroughly to remove the pesticides from the actual surfaces of the fruits and the leaves. And what I do with my fruit and vegetables is I just soak them in some vinegar and some washing up liquid. And I just soak them for half an hour, warm water, bit of vinegar, and washing up liquid, and that actually takes off a lot of the stuff that you find that's coating the plant. So fiber, vitamins, minerals, energy, iron, you'll find them all in the plants. And yeah, very much into eating plants as much as I can.
Wonderful.
And how about you? Do you tend to? I'm sure you do, because your wife cooks. I mean, I've seen evidence of your wife's cooking.
Yes, we do.
And she is amazing, really amazing, Richard. You know, you're seriously blessed there.
Well, we're very blessed to have Dr. Laura, practicing GP, with us to remind us every week to eat healthily, and certainly bless her, she looks really healthy.
Thank you.
Now we're going to talk, and Laura's going to read in a moment some scripture to us, but I just want to remind you that I've been talking about this totally supernatural photosynthesis. The evolutionists want you to believe that 3.8 billion years ago, the life evolved by chance in the primordial slime, including the plant life. And she wants you to believe that it all happened by chance. They want you to believe it all happened by chance, but listen to the word of God from Laura now.
Okay, this is from 1 John, John 1, 1-4. And it says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. How absolutely amazing to have the Word right from the beginning, right from where it all started, Richard. What a wonderful privilege to know the Word, who is Jesus, and to know that he was there right from the beginning. So I'll encourage you watching To The Point to email us at tothepoint@revelationtv.com. Please let us know if you've enjoyed watching these programs and whether you'd like us to discuss other things, and we have such a wide base of things to discuss. Richard, thank you so much for that. I mean, it reminds me of physics. Yeah. I wasn't very good at physics, I have to be honest.
I'm sure you
So
weren't.
it does remind me of all the fascinating aspects of physics. And is there anything you'd like to say before we close?
I think you covered everything.
Well, thank you. Coenzyme Q10, by the way, is part of the vitamins and multivitamins I'd recommend, because it works in the mitochondria and it increases the levels of energy. So there's a top for you. Nice to see you again, and look forward to seeing you next time. God bless.